I love it. Everybody's sugared up now. It's like hitting, like in the next 5 minutes, I can feel it. I am so super excited to be here with all of you today. What a great setting. I'm super impressed with this conference. I love the small, kind of intimate nature of this. So let's give Carl and the team a round of applause for putting this together. So I'm really happy today, and I am here personally for each and every one of you. And I'm also here so that we can be better people for all of the people out there that we build products for. Because I know this is our mission, this is what we care about. And it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day and not really focus on the user. But that is really, truly our mission. And so I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of our practices around that when it comes to our profession. And so I'm just going to start out with like level setting. When I think of what we do with design, whether we're doing it in marketing or doing it in product, or using design practices to create better organizations for our teams and enable and support our design teams, we kind of break down into two categories. First is we are problem finders and we are problem solvers. And the reason I like to break that down in that way is because unless we're figuring out what the problems are that we need to solve, we're not actually going to be effective in going and solving them. And, you know, I personally think that we have the very best job in the world getting to do this. It's certainly a powerful one. I mean, when you think about digital product design or even marketing, we can find a problem, solve it, send it to production, release it, and within a few minutes, we can influence millions of people in a few minutes. I mean, we might actually have the most powerful job in the whole world, in the whole history of the whole world. I mean, when you think about it, that's actually kind of scary, isn't it? I have goosebumps. We can influence millions of people in minutes. And, you know, with that kind of job comes a huge amount of responsibility, because we're problem finders and we're problem solvers, and if we're not careful, we can also become problem creators. And when powerful people like us become problem creators, that's very, very bad. So this brings me to our topic for today. With great power comes great responsibility. It's either Winston Churchill or Spider-Man that said that, depending on where your brains are. But because we have this great responsibility, this is why it's crucial for us to understand ethics in the context of digital design. So what exactly are ethics? Like, we throw around this word ethics a lot, but what does this actually mean? So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines ethics as the discipline of dealing with what is good or bad, with moral duty and obligation. But what does that actually mean? So as humans, we do really interesting things from a tribal perspective. We tend to gain consensus on what we think is right or wrong. And ethics is really kind of a consensus-driven thing. So when you think about ethics in the context of what we do professionally, it's what we as a group of professionals believe is the right thing to do, which drive our ethics. And this isn't like a new concept. This has been happening for centuries and centuries. As far back as the 5th century professional groups have worked hard to craft their own ethical codes. These are standards, of course, that they held themselves and others in their professional circles too. Now, the medical profession was probably the first. They published this thing, Formula Comatos Arbitrorum, which basically requires that physicians widen and deepen their knowledge set through sharing practices with each other. Because prior to that, you know, doctors had their own secret way of treating patients, and it was proprietary, and they didn't share it with each other. But what they found out was that's actually really bad for patient outcomes. So after discovering that, they decided to share knowledge with each other. And by the 18th and 19th century, the whole medical profession had moved to a very sharing guild-like model from one that was not. And today, physicians have 4 main ethical codes that they follow, which I really would like to share with you. It's truly insightful what they've decided to create together. So let's take a look. The first ethical code that medical professionals follow is respect for autonomy, which means that the patient has the right to refuse and to choose their treatment. The second is beneficence, which means that a practitioner should always act in the best interest of their patient, no matter what. The third is non-maleficence, which means first, do no harm, which is the thing we already know. But it goes farther than that. It's not just don't do harm, but it means you actually have to be doing some good. So if you're treating somebody and nothing's happening, you're not really doing your job. And the third is the concept of justice. Distribution of scarce health resources. How do you do that? How do you handle that? Making sure that everyone has access to medical care. Now, through civil rights over the last couple of decades, the medical community has added 2 more ethical codes. The first one is respect for persons, the patient and the family, and the person treating the patient, which may not be the doctor, could be a nurse, could be a physical therapist, any medical practitioner. Everyone in the equation has the right to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background, regardless of their gender, regardless of their religion. And then the 6th one that's been added is around truthfulness and honesty, the concept of informed consent, which means that patients have the right to be informed of what their treatment options are and what treatments they are or are not receiving. I'm sure recently you've seen in the news that this has been a hot topic around Planned Parenthood because our government is trying to put laws in place that keep doctors from doing this. So it's important, again, for this industry to really have a firm stance on what they will or will not do on behalf of us, their patients. And medical practitioners, they're not the only ones that have a lock on ethical codes. Engineering, that's another one, and I don't mean software craftsman engineering. I mean people that build bridges and electrical systems and buildings. They're really interesting as well. The engineering ethical codes, they have a couple tenets that I thought were really poignant, which are first, hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Perform services only in areas of competence, which makes me go, huh, are there designers out here designing things they're not competent in? Issue public statements in an objective and truthful manner. Act for each employer or client as faithful agents and trustees. Avoid deceptive acts. And I love this one. Conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully as so to enhance the honor and reputation and usefulness of the profession. Now, each of those, they get really detailed. So you can drill down into each one of those. This is just one example. I'm not going to walk you through all of them. But just under hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, what does that mean? So it means all of these things to the engineers. I love, which one is it? Engineers shall not reveal facts, data, or information without the prior consent of their client or employer, except as authorized or required by law and code. Maybe we could take a page out of that book. They go so far as to, when engineers graduate from educational programs, I think it's typically a master's degree, they have this ceremony, the iron ring. They're given this iron ring and they wear it on their pinky finger. And as the story goes, this whole ring thing came about because back in the early 1900s, there was a bridge that was built for the Transcontinental Railway from Winnipeg to Moncton. And it collapsed twice, killing over 80 people within like 20 years. And everybody's, and you know, you have, the ring is to symbolize that you have the responsibility of people's lives in your hands. You should always remember that. You should remember that you're fallible, you should remember that you're human, and that you have responsibility to the people that you're building for. And I really think that's cool. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious to have an opinion when people die or not die. Medical profession, engineering, it's kind of life or death. It's pretty black and white. But what are the consequences, what about the consequences when they aren't so black and white? When it doesn't really always look like life and death? What does that mean to us? How should we handle that? Because that's kind of the space that we're in. There's this really interesting book called Tragic Design, and the very first chapter of this book Starts out with a chapter called The Interface That Killed Jenny, which I'm sure you can imagine what that's about. So, has anybody read this book? Yes, no? Cool, I'm telling you all a story for the first time. So The Interface That Killed Jenny. I sound way too excited about that. So Jenny was a young girl who had a really aggressive form of cancer. And in order to treat this cancer, she was going to be given an intravenous treatment, which, if not paired with a aggressive hydration treatment, she would dehydrate and die. And so Jenny went into the hospital. She had the best care. She had an amazing medical team. The nurses were attentive to her every need. She's a small child. And even though they paid attention to almost everything, they missed the detail about the hydration treatment in the electronic medical record system. They were on Epic medical record system. Because the way the information was structured, the nurses didn't see it. And on the second day of her treatment, Jenny died because of the design. And research has been done in the United States. Johns Hopkins medical system, medical errors should rank as the third leading cause of death in the US today. It's actually bigger than this now. I need to go back and do more research, but 2 years ago it was at over 250,000 people a year died from it. And while it's not all software related, it's not all digital related, we can empower a lot of it because a lot of the way that care is being given is now interconnected with digital products. This also happened. Volkswagen Emissions Scandal. I love that they call it like Emission Gate, Dieselgate, give it a fun name. It's a good headline. But the reality was Volkswagen and everybody up from the CEO down to the individual person that coded a Deceptive Act, they were basically trying to cheat their laboratory testing. Well, they didn't cheat. Yeah, they did. They cheated their laboratory testing. And what they did was they coded their emissions so that when it was being tested, it met standard. But when it wasn't being tested, they were actually, all of these cars were programmed to emit 40 times the legal limit of emissions of nitrogen oxide. Over 11 million vehicles, I think it was between 2009 to 2015. 11 million cars worldwide in those model years. And the Volkswagen deployed this software to all of them, and the company pled guilty to charges, and their stock price went down by a third. Who here has ever owned stock that has gone down by a third overnight? Oh, good. You guys are hopefully not affected. If you have, it's a big deal, and a lot of the employees at the company were in that boat, which really is not great for them. And James Lang, the software designer engineer, this was his punishment. This is pretty scary, right? And I think almost everybody in this room could probably go, yeah, but if the CEO told me, if my boss told me, did I really have autonomy to decide? And his manager, this was his punishment, even more heavy-handed, which I think was fitting. Because the reality is, though, while it's not really life or death, it kind of is. Nitrogen oxide, it melts the ozone layer. It creates smog. It deteriorates air quality. They did it for millions of people worldwide. And the saddest part of nitrogen oxide is it really impacts developing lungs the most. So it's hurting all the kids. It's hurting the next generation. And Volkswagen's literally poisoning the next generation of people they were going to go sell cars to, which is sad. And it kind of makes you wonder, what if somebody asked you to do this? Have you thought about that? Has anybody ever asked you to do it? What if you were James Lang and all of these people above you in the company said, no, this is the best thing for us. We should do this. Would you stay? Would you do it? Number 3 that I'm going to pick on today, Cambridge Analytica. There's been a ton of really interesting Netflix stuff on this lately, which I love that people are talking about it. Cambridge Analytica, for those of you who don't know and aren't as big of a news junkie as I am, is a data analytics firm that used personal information harvested from more than 50 million Facebook profiles without the permission of the users in order to build a system that could target voters with personalized content in order to influence their cultural beliefs and alter their voting behavior based on their psychological profile. Christopher Wiley helped build the algorithm.
My name is Christopher Wiley. I'm a data scientist, and I helped set up Cambridge Analytica. It's incorrect to call Cambridge Analytica a purely sort of data science company or an algorithm, company. It is a full-service propaganda machine. If you can control all of the streams of information around your opponent, you can influence how they perceive that battle space, and you can then influence how they're going to behave and react.
How do you feel about your own involvement in this now? I mean, do you feel responsible for what happened?
Yeah, I do. I do feel responsible for it. It's something that I regret. And that's partly why I'm here talking to you, so that I can talk to, so that people can know about what this company does, what this company is. Throughout history, you have examples of grossly unethical experiments.
And is that what this was?
I think that, yes, it was a grossly unethical experiment, because you are playing with an entire country, the psychology of an entire country without their consent or awareness. And not only are you playing with the psychology of an entire nation, you're playing with the psychology of an entire nation in the context of the democratic process.
So the societal impact that Cambridge Analytica had, of course, was manipulation to influence policy, human protection, and people being able to even represent themselves in the democratic process that we currently exist under. And in all three of these cases, I chose each of them for a different thing. The problems that we're creating for ourselves as an industry for the general public that we serve are originating from lack of ethical accountability in each of these areas. In the example of the Epic medical record keeping system, there was negligence. It was created and delivered without truly understanding the problems of the medical staff that was going to be using it, or how it impacts those relying on it, the patients. And there was an obvious lack of skill and understanding on behalf of the designers and the company. And because of that, people were dying. And in the example of the Volkswagen Emissions Scandal, the ethical culprit is really blatant disregard for our laws, from the CEO the whole way down to the individual engineer. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they made the decision to break those laws on purpose. And laws that they broke were put in place to protect the very families that they're selling cars to. And because of that, people worldwide are sicker. And in the case of Cambridge Analytica, it was really a complete lack of empathy for those it would impact. I think the people that were actually developing these algorithms and working in this area really didn't black mirror this. They didn't look at what could be the worst of the worst possibilities, should they create some of these things. And because of that, entire populations of people, it wasn't just the US, are being manipulated in ways that prevent them from understanding the truth and reality of the people they're electing to represent them, so that they can participate in a process meant to protect and govern them. So, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm here to give you some good news, because we don't have to operate this way. Being a human-centered design advocate, it's funny because ethics wasn't part of my educational background. I had my MFA in industrial design. I started in physical product development. And even with that, nary a word of the ethics in my master's program, 15 years ago. But human-centered design was always the cornerstone. And I feel like if we always put the customer at the center of what we're doing, we can avoid all of these ethical problems. It's kind of a no-brainer. And so I wanted to share a case study with you guys, because I think case studies can be really useful because it's showing how we did it. So I work for a company called Pluralsight. It's a tech skills platform. And basically, if you're an engineer or data scientist, somebody like that, you come and you use our platform to learn skills. And you're welcome to go to my website and read all about it. It's a little irrelevant, actually, kind of what we do, aside from the fact that Smarterer was a company that we bought. And the reason why we bought Smarterer was they had this algorithmic way to measure somebody's skill. And we wanted to buy them for that reason, measure skill, so that we could aim somebody at the right content in a library of tens of thousands of pieces of content, so that they could learn the tech skills they needed as fast as possible instead of wading through a massive library of content. That was the intent. That's what we wanted. And we bought them, and we did it. We created this really amazing testing platform. We launched it in 2016. The feature was wildly popular. Within 20 to 25 questions, we could benchmark somebody at a topical level within their tech skills. We could assess and predict the proficiency for them based on all the cohort analysis we could do. The learners loved it. They loved it because we were able to show them how proficient we thought that they were in a subject and get them started on a rather intimidating learning path and making it less intimidating because it was less content for them to consume. So they didn't waste time watching stuff they were already proficient in. And the learners didn't object to us gathering data about them because it was bringing them direct value. And they didn't mind us keeping it because we were able to surface the progress of how they were doing over time as they would grow in their skills. It was this direct feedback loop and track their learning. And because we not only sell licenses to users, we also sell licenses to companies that provide their employees with this great tool. We then started turning our attention to what the companies would want to see with this skills assessment. And this is when stuff started to get kind of tricky for us, honestly, because we started asking questions like, what would the employee be comfortable with us sharing, and why? And would it discourage them from taking an assessment or encourage them? What kind of dynamic would that create? What would their employer want to do with the information? And I'm actually really proud of the team for asking these questions and thinking this way, because in the back of their minds, they were thinking about our first ethical tenet, which is don't weaponize the product. We know that the people that use our product aren't stupid. And if we start using their data in a way that they don't like, they're gonna stop using our product. And we're gonna prevent them from learning. And if we're blocking people from learning and making progress in their life, it not only hurts them, it hurts their family, it hurts their community, it hurts future people that could benefit from products they created. It's got this real ripple effect. And then we, as a design team, have failed to solve our users' problem, which is trying to learn a skill. And in order to make sure that we didn't weaponize our product consciously or even by accident, our team created and executed a really, really detailed research plan. It included behavioral metrics of all of the things they wanted to look for and what it would look like if we created positive outcomes for the user. We also included a few forms of different qualitative and quantitative research, like surveys to understand the breadth and depth of reaction to how data could be used at scale, one-on-one interviews to do deep dives into the why behind the patterns the team had uncovered through the surveys, which brings me to kind of our second ethical non-negotiable that our team stood behind, which is find your blind spots. The team took a hard look downstream at any kind of impact they could have and really examined our own practices. Because one person alone or even a team of people can't always cover all of the bases. And so, let's see. We went to other practitioners within our experience org. We went to other practitioners outside of our company because this was so incredibly sensitive to us. Nothing else that we had ever built was so sensitive. We wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything. Much like medical practitioners are ethically required to collaborate with each other, my team took the same approach. So, what did that turn into? So the team pulled out some of the most important insights that then became guardrails for how we were going to design an experience that a leader of an employee within an organization would get. Our learners, they were really scared about being ranked against their peers. Like, they didn't like that. They were worried their data could be used for that. But they wanted to have conversations around opportunities for professional development with their leaders. So it's not that they didn't want to share it, it's that they just didn't want to be compared to each other. And they were concerned about scores affecting promotions and raises because this skill assessment was a 1 through 300 scoring system, and you got chunked into either beginner, intermediate, advanced, kind of within those areas. So they didn't want it to affect promotions or raises, but they still wanted to share their skills, and they wanted to showcase them to their coworkers and to their leaders. So after going and figuring out all the potential problems with sharing this data, the team designed an experience that our learners were comfortable with. sharing, which is really the proficiency level. I wonder if this will work. Right here, skill level. So you can see we didn't share that. So if this is Nick, and Nick's boss is looking at this, they're not seeing that ranking or that level, but he wanted them to see that level. That's what our learners wanted. It's enough data for learners to be able to have conversations around professional development with their leaders without showing the data that employees feared would be weaponized against them. So when the rubber hits the road, we release the product. Like, we're watching the behavior to see if anything changes. And there were no surprises. There were no negative assessments, no negative behavioral changes in assessment use or in learning use. We had succeeded in creating value, and we didn't weaponize the product. So shortly, because feedback always comes next, so we released that. We started getting feedback from companies about how they envisioned us maybe doing the next generation of using this technology. And among these inquiries were, not surprisingly, use assessments to assess candidates before they hire them, tie assessment performance to pay increases, and require employees to take assessments. Require employees to take assessments. We're a learning company. Learning isn't mandatory. You gotta inspire learning. So, all of these requests that companies were making, they were imagining solutions for real problems that they have right now in their companies that they're trying to solve. Truly understanding the skills of those people they're hiring, that work for them so they can make business decisions. But there's one problem with how they imagined all these solutions. They were suggesting ways for us to weaponize our product. That's pretty painful. So we decided, okay, we're going to take this feedback and we're going to go dig deeper with those leaders and really try to understand all of the inputs. What are they trying to do, and do we have business solving that for them? And I'm going to take a minute and pause just to emphasize this point. We made the conscious decision not to add these suggestions to a feature backlog. Instead, we stopped and we considered the implications. This is a perfect example of proactive, accountable ethics, just taking this. Because it would be super easy, right? Just to shrug our shoulders and go oh, that's what our customers want. It's what sales says they can sell. It's what marketing thinks is exciting. This would make money for our company. It's not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal. It is a huge freaking deal, guys. If we had made that decision, not only would it hurt our learners, but long term it would hurt our company too. Because monthly active user drops, all the stuff. And we're not going to achieve our mission of technology learning. So instead of disincentivizing learning and blocking professional opportunity, this brings us to our third tenet that our team always stands behind, which is you are 200% accountable. You are 100% accountable for you and how you're going to show up and tackle these problems. And you're 100% accountable for everybody around you and how they're tackling the problems too. It's not enough to just say, well, I didn't do it, the other person did it. If the other person's doing it, you need to go address it. If somebody's doing something unethical, that is your business too. Just like if a doctor sees another doctor do something wrong, both doctors are in trouble. So are we. So our team claimed accountability for truly understanding this feedback, and instead they used it as a starting point for our next round of work. We went on to use our knowledge of what companies struggle with to create better solutions that supported both their needs and the learners' needs in a healthy way. We created analytics so that leaders could see competency ranges across groups, teams, and the organizations, so they could go ahead and make those critical decisions about hiring, about changing tech stacks, about knowledge available in the company for critical products. And in doing this, we also maintained our learner trust, giving them the best experience so that they could continue working on their skills and become even more valuable to these organizations that they worked for. Making human-centered design, making these decisions is truly in the best interest of the people. It's not just a practice that allows us to sleep better at night. It's a competitive advantage for our companies in more ways than just for the product. Like ethics, I really feel like they trickle into the DNA of your company and how you make decisions. Like if we hold each other accountable, it creates a lot of great things for us, like accountability, trust, openness, respect, integrity. Decisions are clearly made and weighed based on the shared understanding of values. If everybody has these values, that's how we all make decisions. Teams can focus on collaborating around the best possible outcome. You have increased productivity, effectiveness, happier employees, fewer politics, and ultimately a better bottom line. All of this cultural stuff that we've been talking about as leaders, the heart of it lies at the core of how we practice. And I'd like to hold the company I work for as an example. We're not perfect, but we have had some really amazing growth, and it's not been on the backs of making bad ethical decisions. Last year, May 17th, we IPO'd, woo, which was so cool. It was so exciting to see that happen. And we really attribute this success to an offering that people love because it provides value for them, and a culture that enables people to do their best work, and a mission to democratize technology through accessible education. Operating along human-centered design guidelines, it pays dividends, honestly, in both near term and in long term. And so now it's your turn. Now it's your turn to go get this conversation started with your teams. And I have leaders in this room, so there's extra power. In order for you guys to go get started, I wanted to offer you up those 3 ethical principles that I mentioned earlier to ensure that you are always a great problem finder and a great problem solver, and you and your teams are never problem creators. So, first one, find your blind spots. Be honest and aware of your ability to practice and your team's ability to practice, and make sure you are completely understanding problem finding and problem solving in the context of what you're working on. Don't move from one step into another until you're confident that you have all of the information that you need to do great work and make informed decisions. And it doesn't take as long as everybody thinks it does. Second one, don't weaponize the product. This is my favorite one. I've never written a book. I'm not writing a book. But if I did write a book, this is what I would call it. Make sure that the solution or experience that you are creating does not have downstream negative impacts to anyone. Work to develop experiences that reduce negative consequences to societies, such as threats to health, safety, and make everyday work activities easier. I heard the great expression earlier, which I mentioned earlier, Black Mirror. There's this design exercise people are doing. Like, has anybody watched Black Mirror? It's on Netflix. You know, like worst possible scenario. Like, do that for your product, or do that for your experience. If it was to go horribly wrong in like an alternative universe, like what would that look like? Not only is it kind of fun, but it also is pretty valuable because you're starting to get your team thinking about what ethical implications could be. Last but not least, you are 200% accountable. You are 100% accountable for the things that you do, and you're 100% accountable for the things that the people around you do, especially if that's your team. If you know there are blind spots, or if you see product weaponization happening, it is your personal responsibility to not let that happen. So, I challenge each and every person in this room to follow these principles and go cultivate ethical awareness. It is too easy to avoid, ignore, and pretend that it's not your problem or the issue is going to go away, because it won't. And because of it, it has the potential to kill people, make them sick, manipulate them, remove opportunities to reach your full potential. And what we make impacts millions and millions of people. People like us. People that don't have the power that we have. The tech industry is booming, and the reality is unemployment is low, and we have a choice of where we go work. So we can vote with that power. So act with courage. Because ethics are not really a given. It's something that every single person in this room has to consciously think about and decide to participate in. And wouldn't it be better to think about where your ethical lines are before you actually hit that in an experience at work? It needs to be part of our practice, how we create, how we operate, how we find problems, how we solve them. Otherwise, our ethical decisions will end up taking a backseat to the company line, profits, speed to market, competition. But you have the most powerful jobs in the world, in all of human history. And I know this room is full of people that are not problem creators. It's not that companies are inherently unethical. They are just not people. And because they're not people, it's impossible for them to have ethics. So ethics must live in you. It's the practitioner, inspired by our practice. It's the doctors, not the hospitals, that take the Hippocratic Oath. It's the engineers, not their clients, that wear that iron ring. And for us, we powerful problem finders and problem solvers, we must make the ethical decision not to become product creators. So I invite each of you to take an oath with me if you believe that this is true and this is important in our industry. Raise your right hand. So repeat after me. I will be 200% accountable, know my blind spots, and I will not allow my product to be weaponized, because with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you. Sure. Yeah.
All right, we got time for Q&A. Any questions for Mariah?
Yes. Oh, that is our favorite topic. People misusing the product. It does happen. And as soon as we catch wind of it, it's something. So the way our product is, it looks like one big product, but the reality is there's 50 teams working on parts of it. So if something shows up in like weirdness, how a customer is using it, that team gets immediately notified and they go drill into it. Nothing that we've hit yet has been incredibly insidious that would cause us to roll something back. But if it was, we are willing to roll it back and remove that feature.
Sorry, to be more specific, a young person uses Pluralsight to learn how to write code that they then use to hacking into a banking site. How do you draw the line around what customers do with the products that you build?
Yeah. That is a super deep yes, meta question. I agree. It's like, well, what if you give somebody a t-shirt and they go strangle somebody with it? Should you have made the t-shirt in the first place? I don't know if we have control over that particularly. What we do have on our platform is we have classes like ethical hacking. So people that might be interested in something like hacking, we have, if you want to be a hacker, here's like how you can go channel that for good in the world. That's not answering your question, but that's kind of the closest we can do, is try to channel people in the right direction. We have a very high standard for our content as well, so we don't want people throwing a class on there going how to go do something unethical with code. So if somebody takes skills that they have and they decide to use them for evil in the world, that's a hard one. Yes?
So I saw that you went IPO, and often I see companies that go IPO and it changes some of the fabric of how the company behaves because of investors, because of outside stakeholders.
Yep.
How are you managing that?
Yeah. Have you ever heard the term poop umbrella as a leader? Just kidding. It's another word. I'm not going to use it on the stage. So we have this amazing human named Nate Walkingshaw, who is our chief experience officer for the company. And when he came into the company almost 5 years ago, way before IPO, he and the CEO made a deal that we were going to run ourselves like a human-centered design shop and be an ethical company. And Aaron wants that too, our CEO. He started out being an instructor that would fly around the country and teach people how to code in company settings. And so we're very aligned on that mission. Some things that we've done as we've scaled post that point, just to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, is we just did a reorganization. And what we did was it created my job, head of practices, and I am in charge of making sure that we operate this way within our experience org, 50 teams that are working on the product. The people that report to me are the head of engineering, head of data science and machine learning, head of product, head of design, and head of instructional design. And we have a huge team of principals under us that are deployed out across the whole org. And it creates healthy friction between us and the business unit leaders, who are getting all of the pressure to go build certain things quickly in certain ways, and Nate toes the line. So it really is cultural, and it's at the leadership level. That reorganization has helped us from a scaling perspective to make sure we're organizing teams around efforts, and that they are still continuing our practices and we're elevating those. So, yes?
So the case you brought up where the client asked you guys to add features that you ultimately judged to be unethical. Can you talk a little bit about how the conversation went with them?
Yeah.
About where you were like, yeah, we know, but no. Like,
Yeah. So I was not in a particular conversation, but normally what happens is the sales team is out there in the market, they're hearing things, that feedback comes to the product team, it gets dispersed to the individual product team that's working on it, we go track it down, we make a decision, and all of the decisions that we make around that get written into our sales enablement materials and get put back in the hands of the salespeople so they can tell the story of why we've made the decisions that we have. I have not been in the room when when a salesperson is saying, oh, we don't do it for this reason, and they're getting pushed on by the customer. But I think we do button it up more than I've seen most places, because we put the rationale of the why in there and try to empower our sales team with that material as well. So doesn't mean we still don't get disappointed customers, but it's probably for their own good. Yes? Yeah. Well, I guess it depends. What does ethical pushback look like? It can be, it's less about me and I and more about the customer. Like, what are we trying to, being really clear. If we're using human-centered design, we're understanding the problems of the customer that we're going to go solve, and we're going and solving them. And in an unethical situation, which could also be unuseful, you have very clear, the customer breaks the tie. The customer is at the center. It's not about me as a designer. It's like, hey, if we do this thing, it's going to create this unintended issue for the customer, and they're our customer. So that's the easiest one. James, on the other hand, where he's getting told to break the law, I don't know. He probably should have walked out, but, rent in California is high. So, anyone else? Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.